What if you could step away from every responsibility for 40 days? No emails, work calls, or guilt, and rediscover what truly makes your heart sing. Imagine this. A grant not only covers your duties while you're gone, but also gives you $25,000 to explore anywhere in the world. It covers airfare, ground transportation, lodging, meals, experiences, all of that. And the only rule? Disconnect completely and immerse yourself in things that make your heart sing. Over the next 40 days, I'll be sharing my journey with this exact challenge. So whether I'm snorkeling with sharks, hitchhiking in the back of pickup trucks, trekking across the Serengeti, tracking big game, struggling to breathe and not freeze to death on the top of a 20,000-foot mountain, or breaking bread with new friends from around the globe, I hope you'll join me on this journey. Ben with SuperPumped Business Podcast, and I have two questions for you today. First, if you had $50 million in the bank right now, would you go to work tomorrow? It's an interesting question. Second question, if you had a contract on the table right now that would pay you $55 million a year between 2026 and 2029, so for the next 4 years, $220 million net worth, plus an additional $5 million in incentives and endorsement deals, totaling $60 million or $240 million for the next 4 years, would you go to work? That's a question that this guy right here, Mr. Joe Burrow, Mr. Cincinnati football, has been wrestling with. And he raised some eyebrows recently, and I want to read his quote correctly to you. He said, quote, "If I want to keep doing this, I have to have fun doing it. I've been through a lot, and if it's not fun, what am I doing it for?" Well, that created a massive hubbub here in Cincinnati about why would Joe Burrow leave and who could walk away from that kind of money. But when you start peeling back the layers, it becomes more complex, more nuanced. I started to think, how would I handle that situation? Because if you think about Joe Burrow, estimates are his net worth is $50 million. About 40 of that is liquid. Even if he invested super conservative, only got a 5% return on investment on the 40 million, he would still be living off $2 million a year for the rest of his life, never touch the principal. For most of us, that's a pretty good life, and a lot of us wouldn't go to work. But then you've got to consider all the money that's on the table moving forward. To think of $240 million in cash over 4 years, you think, who would not work for that kind of money? But the reality is, for all of our employees, whether they're someone as high profile as Joe Burrow or just someone who's a lowly entry-level worker in your business, the consideration is more than money. There are 5 things that employees consider when thinking about a job. First is recognition and appreciation. Check mark for Joe on that. Look at this. They're lifting him after the 2021 AFC Championship. He got to go to Super Bowls. Everybody knows him. He's beloved here in the community. So that's a reason to keep working. But career growth, that's a big fat no. This championship was 2021. The next year, they came 1 game short of the Super Bowl. And then the next 3 years, their record has gotten progressively worse. Career growth is on a downward trajectory. Then work-life balance, that's a big fat no for Joe as well. Because the reality is people are breaking into his house. He can't go out to dinner without a million adoring fans saying, "Hey, Joe, sign this, come do this." He can't be anonymous and just live like a normal guy. There is no on-off button for Joe. When he's in the public, he has to be on. No work-life balance. Fourth thing, management and ownership. These are the Bengals offices. The Bengals are notoriously the worst run, worst managed organization in the National Football League. They are the only one without a practice field. If you go just beyond this stadium here, they practice under I-75 along the highway. That is their, quote, practice facility. The league, every year, they survey all the NFL players and they talk about their amenities like the food and the chefs and the locker rooms. Do you know who ranks consistently 30, 31, 32 out of 32 teams? It's these guys, the Cincinnati Bengals. The time Joe Burrow has been here, they have struggled to get him an offensive line that can protect him, and they've struggled to get a defense. There were times where he was scoring 40 points a game, game after game after game, and they were still getting L's. It was unheard of in NFL history. If you think about management and ownership quality, big fat no. Then the final thing people look at is assurance of physical and mental health. And I want to go through Joe's physical injuries since he's worked for this organization, doing his craft on this field. 2020, completely blew out his knee, just blew up his knee. Needed surgery to reconstruct ACL, MCL, PCL, and meniscus. That is like the quadfecta of blown out knees. 2021, busted broken finger. 2022, MCL sprain in the Super Bowl. 23, calf strain to start the year. Torn wrist ligament that required surgery to end the year. And then 2025, had a turf toe, foot injury that required surgery, and he missed about half the season. When you think about the wear and tear on the body, as well as the mental stress, it is enormous. As you think about your employees, if you think just because you put together a good financial package, whether it's $55 million a year plus $5 million incentives, or whether it's whatever it is, maybe it's $40 an hour for an entry-level worker. I want you to think of what are you offering or not offering beyond that in terms of recognition, in terms of career growth, in terms of work-life balance, in terms of management and ownership quality. Are you doing the things you need to do that inspire confidence in the rank and file like Joe? Finally, are you protecting their physical and mental health? If you're not doing those things, even if you're backing up the truck full of $260 million, they might say no thanks. This has been our Super Pump podcast. I hope Joe, for my own sake as a fan, does decide to keep working and doing his trade here at the Bengals Stadium, because he is fantastic to watch. But if he were to walk away, I could completely understand, because a lot of things, including this management and this ownership group, are not trending in his favor. Thanks for joining me today. If you need help with your business, whether it's the Bengals or whether it's food or whether it's a hotel or whatever you're in, hit me up. I'd love to talk and work with your team. Thanks for joining me. If you've ever dreamed of pressing pause and rediscovering what makes your heart sing, I invite you to follow along on our YouTube channel or on Super Pumped Life on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'll be posting every day, not only a podcast, but updates, stories, bonus coverage, and reflections through this Super Pumped adventure. If you're one of our awesome audio-only listeners, I would encourage you to go over to YouTube to see the incredible video footage of all that is going on in this 40-day Super Pumped adventure in the wilderness. And with Super Pump Podcast, we are in the Dolphins fan zone, Miami, here with some of our friends. We are talking today about how you can come from nowhere, literally, to own an NFL team and an NFL stadium. So most of these fans that we're celebrating with today have no idea that a man named Joe Robbie from Cincinnati, South Dakota, came to own this spectacle known as an NFL franchise, and this stadium now known as Hard Rock Stadium. Let me tell you a little bit about Joe's story. Grew up in Cincinnati, South Dakota, not South Carolina, South Dakota. Immigrant family, dad was Lebanese, mom was Irish. First kid in his entire town, not just his family, but his entire town, to get a college degree. He worked in the Civilian Conservation Corps, where he was doing public work projects during the Great Depression, and started a law office or a law firm after time in the Navy, started a law firm in Mitchell, South Dakota. If you've ever been to Mitchell, I have. Home of the Corn Palace. We're going to continue on around here, clear to the other end of this place, and try to find Joe's statue. He started this law firm, and eventually, like a lot of lawyers, he decided he wanted to be in politics, and so he ran for governor of South Dakota. I'd love to tell you he won, but the reality is he was trounced by 22 points, and he was really mad about that because it felt personal to him, like, why don't you love me? Why don't you respect me? That kind of thing. And so he ended up deciding to heck with South Dakota. He would move to Minneapolis. And so he started a new law firm there in Minneapolis, and he made some success, but he made one important friend. It was the commissioner of the American Football League, the AFL commissioner. Back then, there was the AFL and the NFC, and they had not merged yet. And his friend said, hey, we want to put a franchise in Miami. And Joe, he was an ambitious guy. He said, sure, I would love to. Think about a franchise in Miami. And so with that, they put a franchise in Miami. But Joe needed to raise $7.5 million. Now, rumor has it, or word has it, or legend has it, he had only made $27,000 a year in his law firm. He needed a lot of outside investors. So he ended up getting those investors. 1966 awarded a franchise, the Miami Dolphins, in the AFL. 2 years later, merged with the NFL, and the rest is history. That's why it's the AFC and the NFC in the Super Bowl. One of the cool things is he played in the Orange Bowl, and the Orange Bowl became a dump. And the city of Miami wasn't willing to build him a new stadium. And so he said, I've got this incredible asset. I'm going to build my own stadium halfway between Fort Lauderdale and Miami. And he did that, all with private money. It's the only NFL stadium, all financed through private funds. And so he built it, and everyone's like, this is crazy. But he had two good things going for him. Location, South Florida sun, which even here in the middle of winter is bright and beautiful, and I'm actually sweating. But the second thing is it was in the middle of the metro area. All he has is the Dolphins, but over time he gets the Miami Hurricanes. Then he gets this Grand Prix race. We came in, and you can see some of the Grand Prix over here. It runs Formula One Miami Grand Prix here. Then he gets national championships. Nick Saban won his 7th national championship here to set the record, and 6 at Alabama here in this stadium. Joe Montana won a Super Bowl here over these Cincinnati Bengals that are here today. Steve Young won his only Super Bowl here. John Elway went back-to-back here after losing earlier to San Francisco here. Peyton Manning won his only Super Bowl with the Colts here. Drew Brees, only Super Bowl with the Saints here. And Patrick Mahomes won his first Super Bowl with the Chiefs right here in this stadium. National championships, USC and Pete Carroll and that juggernaut, 55-19 over Oklahoma. That Super Bowl featured Heisman winners, past, present, future. Jason White, Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush. Tim Tebow won a national championship here. And my favorite, many years ago, back in the early 2000s, Bobby Bowden and Joe Paterno squared off in the Orange Bowl in this very stadium, went to double overtime. At that time, 2 most winningest coaches ever. So if you think you can't do big things just because you're from some podunk town and nobody's ever been to college or nobody's ever come out of there, remember Joe Robbie? This stadium, Joe Robbie, South Dakota, ended up owning an NFL franchise, built this massive palace of football and soccer, and even baseball. The Florida Marlins played here for a while. So you can do it. If you need help, hit me up. I would love to help you go from wherever you are to this awesome spectacle known as NFL football. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you have a great day. If you've ever dreamed of pressing pause and rediscovering what makes your heart sing, I invite you to follow along on our YouTube channel or on SuperPumped Life on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'll be posting every day, not only a podcast, but updates, stories, bonus coverage, and reflections through this Super Pumped adventure. If you're one of our awesome audio-only listeners, I would encourage you to go over to YouTube to see the incredible video footage of all that is going on in this 40-day Super Pumped adventure in the wilderness. Ben with Super Pumped Podcast. I am super excited about the NFL playoffs, and I'm here to tell you today the one thing that's the difference between teams that are number 1 seeds and teams that are missing the playoffs. Let's go back a few years, 2021, 2022. These 4 teams had really bad years, all 4 last place. Texans 4-13, Seahawks 7-10, Broncos 7-10, and Browns 8-9. Like a lot of teams in the offseason, they decided to shake things up. The Texans and the Browns decided they were going to make a massive trade. The Texans had had some success with quarterback Deshaun Watson, but it just wasn't working out for off the field and on the field reasons. These two decided to partner up, and then the Seahawks and the Broncos decided to partner up and make a massive trade. Seahawks were ready to move off Russell Wilson, a quarterback who had won them their only Super Bowl, and the Broncos wanted to get back to the promised land. Here's how this whole trade went down. And it's kind of crazy. The Browns, after that 8-9 season, traded for Deshaun Watson and a 6th-round pick and gave up 3 firsts, a third, and a fourth for that. Meanwhile, the Broncos went out and decided to get Russell Wilson. They traded for Wilson and a 4th rounder, and look at the haul they gave up. Quarterback, tight end, defensive lineman, first round pick, second, and 5th. They arguably gave up way more than the Browns did. And do you know what the result was? It was 2 years of failure. The next year, with their new quarterbacks, the Browns went 7-10, another last place finish. And then in 2023-24, Watson only played 6 games. Meanwhile, the Broncos again finished last. They actually went worse. They went from 7-10 to 5-12, another last place finish. And then in 23-24, Wilson led them to a 7-8 record, but it was kind of fueled by the defense. It was almost in spite of him and not because of him. His PFF was around 20 out of 32 quarterbacks, somewhere in that 19 to 22 range. It wasn't working for either of these teams. There's a couple interesting things. All this haul of picks that went to the Texans fueled them into the playoffs this year, and this massive haul of picks is why the Seattle Seahawks are the number 1 seed this year, home field throughout the NFC playoffs, because they had the guts to move off their guy. Here's what I want to talk about today in these two organizations. Both realized 2 years in, those picks were a whiff. They had missed on those picks. Sometimes in business and organizations, when we whiff bad, it's hard because you got to eat it. And nobody wants to do that. 1, there's ego, but 2, there's a boatload of money. Basically, the Broncos decided, you know what? It hasn't worked. We're moving off Russell Wilson. Well, everybody said, you can't move off Russell Wilson. It's an $85 million dead cap hit. Nobody does that. Nobody had ever taken that big of a cap hit. The Broncos said, we're going to do it. We're going to roll up our sleeves and figure this thing out. They took the largest cap hit in NFL history, moved on, and do you know where they are this week? They are hosting the AFC playoffs as the number 1 seed 2 years after moving off this mistake. Meanwhile, the Cleveland Browns decided, we don't want to eat the cap hit. We're just going to keep rolling with Watson. Instead of eating $131 million to move off him, even now, they're refusing to do that. So the Browns continue to be in last place. So if we go back to these teams, the Seahawks, the Broncos, the Texans, all made moves. 2 of them made bad moves, moved off the moves. All are playoff teams. These 2 are number 1 seeds, and these guys are still sitting on the outside because their ego wouldn't let them make the change. The Browns continue to have no Super Bowls, 1 playoff win since '99, and in 2025, yet another last place finish, 5-12. Meanwhile, the Denver Broncos, 8 Super Bowl wins, 3 championships, and number 1 throughout the playoffs. So in your organization, when you screw up, eat the cost, move on, and you will create an organization that understands that there's humility in the leadership, but also a commitment to winning. I hope you enjoy the NFL playoffs as much as I do. If you like today's episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or for sure YouTube, where you can watch my pretty face and all the great video footage. Thanks for joining us. If you've ever dreamed of pressing pause and rediscovering what makes your heart sing, I invite you to follow along on our YouTube channel or on SuperPumped Life on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'll be posting every day, not only a podcast, but updates, stories, bonus coverage, and reflections through this Super Pumped adventure. If you're one of our awesome audio-only listeners, I would encourage you to go over to YouTube to see the incredible video footage of all that is going on in this 40-day Super Pumped adventure in the wilderness. In your business, how do you measure your employees' performance? Ben with Super Pumped Podcast at Great American Ballpark, Cincinnati, Ohio. One of the things that's cool about baseball is they measure everything. Every statistic is measured by baseball. As we come into Great American Ballpark, you can see here's a statue of Joe Morgan. And then up here you have one of the hit king, Mr. Pete Rose, who just passed away last year. Charlie Hustle was with the Reds 1963 to 1978 and 1984 to 1986. Any idiot can see that Joe Morgan or Pete Rose or Johnny Bench down here, these kind of players are excellent players. You don't need an advanced degree in analytics to figure that out. But the question becomes, how do you measure players that aren't coming off the top? This is Tony Perez right here. One of the things baseball does, and it's a really cool statistic, it's called WAR. And it doesn't mean conflict between nations. It's called wins above replacement. One of our listeners, Michael, he said, hey, think about WAR in terms of your business, in terms of ranking your employees. I thought, that is a fantastic idea, Michael. How do you think about whether your employee, or whatever position they are, how do they perform against others? There are really three ways to look at this as we come on into the stadium here. The first way, if you're evaluating your employees and their performance, is just your gut or observation. And these Hall of Famers, anybody can see they are excellent. They are high performing. You've got batters. You've got Frank Robinson here. You've got all these people. WAR allows you to measure in baseball how you would do against the average replacement for you. Recently, Kyle Schwarber, who's a local kid, played for the Cincinnati Flames, negotiated a really big deal because his wins above replacement was so high. They knew he had tremendous value to his team. But in just normal businesses, a lot of us aren't measuring that. We're just going by gut feel. Those days are over. This idea of just gut or observation isn't a good way to measure your employees. So the second is internal ranking. But the reality is, okay, if all you're doing is measuring your people against themselves, like with the Reds, you would know, okay, is Johnny Bench the best catcher? Wouldn't take long to figure out Johnny Bench is the better player, or P. Rose. But you don't get an accurate assessment of how good that second person is. They might be less good than Johnny Bench, but still an excellent player. And then the third way to measure an employee is called advanced analytics. And this is one I want you to focus in on your business this year. One of the things you can do is you can look at trade publications. There's all kinds of information now with AI about productivity levels of employees and managers. If you just dig a little bit, particularly in trade publications, you will find a treasure trove of information that shows that. Second way, and this is one I have used so much in my businesses, if you're in a franchise business, like I was in a commercial cleaning franchise, you can compare to the national statistics on productivity of vacuum cleaners and restroom cleaners and all these positions. Then you can begin to measure, okay, my person can get through this many thousand square feet in a 4-hour shift. So it's this many square feet per hour. And you can begin to assess them against industry standards. And if they're really killing it, you can pay them more. If they're not killing it, you can work with them to try and get those standards up. The other thing is collaboration within your network. The guys that I was in business with in my region, we could talk about how much volume, how much net revenue is each general manager or each area manager covering. I could see, boy, some of our people are really covering a lot and others aren't covering so much. And then based on that, you could assess that, whether that's to give them a big reward and a big contract like Kyle Schwarber just got, or whether it's to say, hey, we need to do some retooling, maybe some retraining, because you're just not cutting it. As you think about baseball season about to begin, these first pitches taking place and all these assessments in each of these camps where these organizations like the Reds are trying to figure out who's going to be on their 25-man roster this year. I want you to think of your 25-man roster or 250,000 person roster or whatever it is, and how are you measuring your employees? How are you assessing whether they are cutting it or whether they could be doing better? If you need help with this, hit me up at superpumped.com. I'd love to work with you. I've got a degree from Harvard. I know about these things, and I've done it in the field. So it's not just all head knowledge. It's actually hard-fought knowledge. Woohoo, baseball season is upon us, and I'm going to go try to see if I can get in the gates here. Thanks for joining me. Oh, we're locked. But it's only a few weeks away. What if you could step away from every responsibility for 40 days? No emails, work calls, or guilt, and rediscover what truly makes your heart sing. Imagine this. A grant not only covers your duties while you're gone, but also gives you $25,000 to explore anywhere in the world. It covers airfare, ground transportation, lodging, meals, experiences, all of that. And the only rule? Disconnect completely and immerse yourself in things that make your heart sing. Over the next 40 days, I'll be sharing my journey with this exact challenge. Whether I'm snorkeling with sharks, hitchhiking in the back of pickup trucks, trekking across the Serengeti, tracking big game, struggling to breathe and not freeze to death on the top of the 20,000-foot mountain, or breaking bread with new friends from around the globe. I hope you'll join me on this journey.